Scrutiny. I'm glad to see so many of you here. Of course, so many of you in the chamber for the preceding function as well. So we have one main item on our agenda this evening, so we'll run through the basics first. Item 1, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of July. They appear on pages 3 and 4 of your pack. Members, are we happy to sign those off as a correct reading? Thank you, everybody. Lovely. So we can move on to item 2, apologies. Do we have any apologies, Mrs. Foakes?
Yes, Chairman, we've got apologies from Councillors Boyle, Cope, Cox, Sisley, Sutton and Kay Williams.
Lovely, thank you very much. We haven't got any other apologies to note? No. So we can move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Have we had any declarations of interest? Nobody is showing, so thank you very much, everyone. We can move on then to the main item of our agenda, which is an update report on climate change, on the climate change strategy. So we have both the Cabinet Member and Corporate Director to talk us through their report. Could I hand over to Councillor Bates, please, to introduce this item?
Good evening, members. Thank you very much. I'm glad somebody replied. I'm pleased to be able to advise you that a considerable amount of work has been carried out over the last 12 months relating to climate change. I'm just going to run through the key achievements during the period 2021 through to 2022. Number 1, over 21 organisations have benefited from a share of over £4,000 of funding to deliver local initiatives through the Climate Prize programme. Number 2, delivery of carbon-saving initiatives at the hub. They're to be monitored in 22-23. Third point, to switch to green energy at the council hub. Number 4, network recovery mapping has been completed. 5, success in attracting £1.1 million through the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund to be shared by South Staffordshire Council and Stafford Borough Council. The 6th point, 8 new EV points have been installed at the council hub. 7, successful in attracting funding for solar-powered EV points at the council hub, and they're to be operational during 2022-23. On the 3rd of November, we shall be holding a South Staffordshire Council Climate Change Networking event at the Woodlands Farm on the Bradford Estate. That's at Weston-under-Lizard, and members will receive an invitation to attend shortly. And I do hope that you'll come along and support this very important event. And I'll now hand over to Annette Roberts, who will elaborate on the various achievements that have taken place. Annette, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. And really this... really this evening what I just wanted to go through, and I'll hand you over to Ryan in a moment, who can go through some of the detail. Just want to do a little bit of a recap and just remember the conversations we were having about this time last year in relation to our climate strategy and our action plan and what we said we were going to do. And most of you will remember that this sort of plan was put up in terms of this was our climate change strategy. We had 4 overarching arms for that: raising awareness, strategic planning responsibilities, influencing partners, and council operations. Councillor Bates has given a very, very quick run through in relation to some of those things that have been achieved over the past year. And Ryan will further those in a little bit more detail. So our action plan that we had for that first year of operation was really focusing on those key points. And we're really pleased to report that many of those have come to fruition, particularly in relation to our own carbon initiatives and our own carbon saving. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that, and you'll be able to see some graphs and the science, if you like, shortly. If we can have the next slide, please, Ryan. I won't go over these in too much detail, but I will, because Councillor Bates has just run through them. But we're obviously delighted for the first year of our inaugural strategy, really, and the action plan. We thought it was really critical that we have a climate festival to really promote and demonstrate the engagement that we wanted to achieve, both with our businesses but also with our communities. And I think you'll see from what Ryan's going to show you later that we've done that. But we know that we've got more to do, and there are a number of organisations who've engaged with us over this last year, but there's many more that we want to tap into. So we want to be looking at those conversations. One of the key things I think is really critical is the switch to green energy in the council hub. You'll see from the graphs that Ryan's going to show you in a moment or two about the impact that that's having, and the impact certainly that will have next year. And Ryan will explain why the impact will really be seen next year in relation to that difference. So ultimately, of course, what we're trying to get to is for us, in terms of our own estate, to be carbon zero. And that's obviously what we'll be doing, and Ryan will talk through some of the plans and some of the plans to utilise some experts to give us an audit to help us to get to that position, and for decisions that we may need to make in terms of our own operations and how we manage this going forward. Next slide, please. So this really is almost like I suppose it's an infographic really, but it just demonstrates under those 4 headings of raising awareness, strategic planning responsibilities, influencing partners, and council responsibilities, in terms of what our overall achievements have been. So that delivering 2.5 million of green initiatives in the Cotswold Community Hub. Obviously what we sat in here this evening with that. We've also improved energy efficiency on our own enterprise centres, and we're doing more with that as well. I think particularly important, and we'll probably come and touch on a little bit more on this later, is our role in terms of specifically in the strategic planning responsibilities. And members will know from a conversation we had this time last week with our strategic planning team is about how important, and we've put climate change at the heart of the new local plan. So the new local plan, on the assumption that it's adopted, on the assumption that it gets adopted as the plan for this district, will clearly have some clear position in relation to climate change, and how we will need to respond to that from a district's point of view, and how we expect development to respond to that, and how we will deal with planning applications in relation to renewable energies. So I think this is my cue to hand over to Ryan, who's the expert in terms of the council's carbon footprint, and who's going to talk you through some of the detail. Thank you. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Annette. Good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to talk through this tonight. I'm going to start by briefly discussing the council carbon footprint. That's what we do in terms of our own operations, and the climate impact of this. So I'll start with the headlines, if that's okay. Members will recall that we record our the carbon impact of our operations in terms of kilograms carbon dioxide equivalent. And we've been reporting on this since 2010. So in terms of a headline figure, since we started reporting, we've seen a 37% reduction in our own carbon emissions since we started this piece of work. Now, in terms of bringing this up to date, from the last time I was here reporting on this back in 2020, 2021, we've seen nearly a 1% decrease on the previous year. And members should know really that it is going to be more and more difficult for us to reduce our carbon footprint further. It's not all bad news. I mean, this time last year, we did warn that there may be a possible increase in our carbon footprint due to sort of returning back to normal, as it were, post-COVID. But, I'm happy to say that we haven't seen an increase at all. In fact, a very slight decrease. And that's, mainly due to the work that we're doing and the associated changes in our own working practices. So the carbon footprint itself is measured in 3 parts, and this is the cumulative measure of it. It's measured in 3 scopes. Scope 1 relates to our direct emissions, which is how we use gas and how we use diesel and petrol in our in-house fleet. So this is the measure for that part of that. So we have seen a slight increase in gas usage at the hub this past year, a 3% increase, mainly due to sort of staff returning to work to the hub and gas in areas of the building. Members will note the big drop in 2019-2020, which was due to the refurb of the hub and the revamp of our heating system at the time. Scope 1 accounts for 13% or thereabouts of our total carbon footprint. So Scope 2 is mainly due to our electricity usage. Now, we have seen a bit of a jump in electricity usage in this year, a 1% increase on previous year. But we moved to a green tariff in December, so the effects of that will be reported on next year mainly. It's perhaps interesting to note that in the previous year we used as much electricity between April and December as we did the entire previous year. Now, electricity usage probably accounts for 12% of our total footprint, and as I say, electricity at the hub itself has probably accounted for 8% of that total footprint over the years, nearly 81,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide. We expect this to be wiped out when we're reporting next year due to our move to green energy tariffs. The rest of the electricity usage is mainly made up of what we do at the depot and Baggeridge, and we'll be looking into what we can do around that in the coming years. We are tied into certain contracts, but nonetheless we'll be seeing what we can do when they come up for renewal. And finally, the big hitter, Scope 3. This is our other indirect emissions, business mileage and the effects of our external waste contract on our operations. This has happily seen a decrease of 1% from the previous year, mainly due to a drop in staff mileage and associated mileage from the fleet at Biffa. Now, Biffa did purchase a series of newer vehicles in 2022, which, as you'd imagine, are far more efficient and using less diesel, but there are more on the road each week. In total, Scope 3 accounts for just over 75% of our total carbon footprint as a council. So, what does this mean to us really? Where are we now? As I say, over the years since we started reporting this, we have seen a 37% decrease, but as I say, this is beginning to flatline now, and is going to get more and more challenging for us to reduce further as the years go on. As I say, happily, the predicted jump to pre-COVID levels didn't happen. We didn't see much of an increase in energy usage this year, so long may that continue. And as I say, if members know nothing else really, we need to be aware that Scope 3, our external fleet and stuff, is 75% of our total and therefore our biggest impact. So in terms of taking this forward, and our action for myself and Ned to be looking at, we'll be reviewing this scope, assessing the impact of it, and getting some external help really in what we can do around this, and more importantly, sort of cost options up for how we're going to travel towards zero carbon in the future, and what this means to yourselves and residents of South Staffordshire. As Annette mentioned, I'd like to very quickly present some of the outreach and engagement opportunities that the 2022 Climate Change Festival has afforded us, really, and illustrate how we're reaching out to the communities to raise awareness of this issue, and also highlight, the good practice that's going on and what can be done locally. So I'll start by mentioning the South Staffordshire Youth Committee, and this was part of our engagement, and it's also a personal thank you from me to the members who joined in on the day or helped us to promote this to the schools. This was hosted in May, and we saw 30 children from primary and secondary schools join us in a lively debate at the hub around climate change. There was lots of door knocking from ourselves and links to the county and local members to engage with these schools. We developed some good local contacts, which we're certainly hoping to build on in the coming years. On the day, there was presentations. Annette and myself, again, presented on the work that the council was doing around climate change. The Friends of Bilbrook were in to talk around volunteering and the environmental perspective of what that can bring to society. We're really pleasantly surprised by the primary schools in the morning. There was, the schools brought their own presentations in that they'd like to share with us and the other children. And one lad had put together a presentation all by himself the night before that he wanted to come and bring along. A real powerful piece of work, really. And in the afternoon, we were joined by the Bradford Estates, who came to talk to the secondary school children about sustainable house building and materials. So just a couple of quick photos from the day. As I say, in the morning we had a primary school session. There were 4 schools attended. Glenthorne Primary, Lane Green, Bilbrook Middle and St Nicholas in Cotsall. What the photos don't get across really was the sort of buzz of noise in the room and the amount of engagement from the kids. It was a very lively session and really encouraging to see the interest and lots of good questions and ideas that were coming through. And then moving along to the secondary school session of the afternoon, we were joined by Cheslin Hay Academy at Womben High, and as I say, a representative from the Bradford Estates to talk about sustainable house building. And really what I took away from this afternoon, apart from the debate itself, was some of the good practice and the examples that were going on in the community. There was one child who was talking about the work that he's already involved in through church groups and volunteering with the food bank within Cheslin Hay. Which is, it's great to see that sort of local action going on. The bottom picture shows a bit of a working example of how we're trying to pull together some of the ideas for the day into a bit of an infographic, really. We were conscious we were going to get lots of ideas, and we were just wondering how we could sort of present these back as a record of the day. So what we did, we booked an illustrator to come in and quickly live draw the ideas and the discussions of the children, which made it more real for them and certainly encouraged the conversation to continue. So very quickly on the left-hand side there's some very quick drawings of what the council's doing in terms of outreach. And the right, the more crammed panel, is some of the ideas that the children are bringing forward and what the council, indeed, we could all be doing. Things like solar panels, using less water, encouraging local shopping, reducing food miles. As I say, I was particularly interested here, one little girl who was very concerned about sharks becoming extinct. Not quite sure how that relates to South Staffordshire or whether I could justify the time or expenses into looking into that one, but nonetheless. And in the middle, we've got the pledge tree, which was a bit of a working document we built on the day, really. And this, by the end of the day, this was covered in post-it notes of climate pledges that each child committed to take away with them. And these are simple ideas, really, that we hope will become part of their everyday lives in terms of helping local climate change. As a follow-up to this, we'd be looking to host another event and invite the schools back. And we'll also be offering the schools a tree this autumn as a thank you for taking part. Moving on, Councillor Bates and Annette touched upon the Climate Prize. So as we've said, we've had over 21 winning applications, sharing over £4,000 worth of funding for local climate projects. And this is another way we're engaging and working with groups across the district. So we're seeing applications from parish councils, schools, community groups, and in the next couple of months we'll be seeing repair cafes, workshops, green travel schemes, and biodiversity planting, including trees and wildflowers, taking place. So we gave the funding out early on in the year, so we'll be catching up with the groups in the next few weeks and getting an idea of what they've been up to, how they've been getting on with the funding, before finally coming together in December to do a bit of a ceremony to sort of celebrate the work that they've been doing, and also offer a further prize out for some of the best schemes. So finally, a quick sort of summary slide really around sort of work in progress and what members can expect to see in the coming months really. So we've already discussed the carbon audit, and we're going to be looking at in more detail what sort of zero carbon means for the district in terms of costings and options and how we're going to get there. In the coming months we'll be rolling out carbon awareness training to sort of members, starting with the cabinet, and then on to sort of members, CLT, our own managers. And we're hoping this will inform inform decision making, particularly with reference to sort of climate change in terms of what the council does. We'll be looking at an EV strategy, and what does this look like and mean for us? You know, how do we offer this as our industrial estates, key car park sites, and sites like Bagridge across the district? What we'd like to do is maximise opportunities for EV charging and therefore make it easier for residents to take the plunge into that, but at the same time minimising perhaps the operational risk to this council of offering that. We realise this is an ever-changing technology and we need to be sort of careful how we progress with this. The local plan and the policy framework. Now, Annette, I believe did you want to come back in here? Okay. Yeah, as Annette touched upon earlier, we'll be continuing developing the policy framework, and particularly with reference to sort of sustainable and low carbon development and house building. Nature recovery, as Annette touched upon, we've completed the nature recovery mapping for the district in partnership with the Wildlife Trust. And we're aware, these are opportunities for the district and biodiversity through the planning system. And we're linking in with the Wildlife Trust. Members will be aware that we're recruiting an ecologist to sort of help deliver this work on the ground. And finally, working with businesses. As Councillor Bates mentioned at the start of the presentation, we would like to invite all members to a climate change networking event on November the 3rd at the Bradford Estates. We'll also be inviting local businesses, farmers and sort of parish councils local to the estate. I would encourage attendance. I think it should be a really interesting day. I mean, there'll be an opportunity to see a presentation on our own work and what we're doing at the council in terms of outreach stuff, but also to see, I'm particularly interested to see what the Bradford Estate are doing around their regenerative agriculture on the site, and also again hear about the latest techniques on sustainable house building. I'll be sending an invite out to all members this week, and we'd ask for an RSVP to the Bradford Estates themselves, so they can keep tabs and numbers by the 12th of October. And I think that concludes what we've got to present here, and I'd like to thank you for your time. We're obviously happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you everybody for introducing that item and talking us through that report, all really very interesting. Already a few members starting to indicate. I think I saw Councillor Hewitt first. Councillor Hewitt.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Ryan, there's a couple of things which I'd like to just raise with you, really. Partly questions, I guess. I have on a number of occasions, and I think that Annette will remember this, asked questions about the contribution financially and electrically of the solar panels you have on the roof of this building. And you showed the graph of the declining consumption of electricity, and I'm not at all sure what part, if any, these solar panels might have played in that. My second question deals with one of these strange paradoxes in that we are installing charging points for EVs, which will of course consume electricity, which will appear on our electricity account by some means or other, at the same time as we are trying to reduce consumption. And I'm just wondering how that kind of balances out, so to say. Thank you.
Ryan, happy to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. I wouldn't profess to be an expert on the details of the solar panels, but we could return to another meeting and discuss that one in detail if that's okay. I mean, I appreciate It is a balancing act because this year we have seen our electricity usage at the hub increase, but then at the same time we made the switch to getting that electricity from a renewable source. So the carbon footprint of that has reduced. I appreciate it is a bit of a balancing act. You know, we do need to get our energy from somewhere. And you know, there's some very difficult conversations and long-term sort of questions around this, and particularly at the same rolling out EV across the district. I mean, it's a sort of what we'd ultimately like to do is encourage folk to sort of not use cars at all, but we realise the practicalities of that in this district is a very difficult one. You know, as much as you like to encourage greener travel, it's you know, folk will still need some sort of vehicles to get around the district. So that's, you know, that's why we're sort of trying to make it easier for residents to sort of make that sort of choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Annette, did you want to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to back up everything that Ryan said, I think in terms of the actual solar panels on the roof of this building, obviously they are contributing to obviously to the electricity that's obviously consumed in this building. I would the percentage figure that we've got is quite, it's not a huge amount, because obviously we're a big consumer, but they are obviously helping. And I think the bigger issue is the impact that we're having in relation to the fact that the electricity, the rest of the electricity used in terms of running the electrics in this building is all renewable, is from a renewable source. The other thing I'd put in terms of the EV, absolutely, in terms of, and there's a cost implication as well with the rising prices of electricity, in terms of actually encouraging more use of electricity through electric vehicles. I know, totally understand that. Those are the ones that there's 8, I think, that are on the car parks here. And there's one that's about to be installed or about to be operational in other parts of the district as well, in sites that we own. But the ones that are on the bearings on the car park at the back, they don't use, they are from solar panels, obviously from the panels on the roofs, that then focus that energy into a battery, so that anybody using those, and they're not operational yet, but they will be very, very shortly. They're not using any electricity, as in they're not pulling off the grid, they're using the solar panel. Now, you know, without preempting the key piece of work that Ryan and I will be doing over the coming months in relation to the audit, I would imagine, and without wishing to preempt this, I would imagine that some of those things will be looking at the options that we've got in terms of creating energy not from the grid. So I know some local authorities across the country have covered lots of parts of their car parks with solar panels. I'm not sure whether that's something that we might want to be considering. But you know, those are conversations that we'll have to have if we want to really make an impact on our, you know, so of course we want to make an impact, but if we're going to make a significant impact, those are the sort of those conversations that we're going to have. So not only reducing it to a renewable energy, but reducing the consumption of electricity per se as well.
Thank you, Annette. Councillor Ewart, if you'd like to come back.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, the thing that strikes me about this is that the technology is still kind of evolving. You know, you talked about having a battery buffer for the EV charging points in the staff car park. And every time you convert electricity from one thing to another, you have losses. And one of these times, it would be really interesting to have a breakdown on exactly how all that really works out in detail. I mean, how much does it cost? And what's the life of the batteries? What's the write-off rate of all of these things? It's rather like my solar panel question about 2.5, 3 years ago, which you probably recollect, that there's an awful lot of financial arithmetic that could be applied to this. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't stand the cost and it's justified. I'm not saying don't do it because it's expensive. I'm saying let's be sure we know exactly what we're doing financially as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewart. Annette, did you want to come back on that? Or?
Only just to say absolutely, and I think that's where we are with this really, in terms of, you know, it's a term that's been used before, every little helps, doesn't it, in terms of chipping away. And you can see on the graphs that we've shown you this evening, we've made some big savings carbon savings, but it's now going to get more difficult to do that because if you want a better expression, some of that low-hanging fruit has been we've had. So it's going to be more difficult to do that as we go along. But everything we do is chipping away at that and creating those savings. But like you say, it's important. You're absolutely right. Conversations that we've been having 2 or 3 years ago in terms of the capability and the performance of some of the initiatives and some of the interventions and some of the technology would be different now because of the changes that I have in terms of the faster charging. And so on and so on. So we've always got to stay ahead of the curve. We've got to make sure that we don't end up with a load of obsolete kit either, because that wouldn't be great. But we've always got, and that's why there's a treading cautiously, treading with confidence, but treading cautiously as well. And I think that's probably the name of the strategy in relation to this. But sorry, I forgot to pick up your point in terms of the understanding how the battery works. I think I've having a very brief conversation earlier, and Ryan and I were trying to get our head around it. I think somebody with a degree in engineering would be needed to be able to expand that, not a town planning degree. But we're more than happy to give more detail on that. When we've got it.
Thank you very much, Annette, for those explanations. Councillor, you happy?
A couple of things that occurred to me is that when I played around in science about a phenomenon, true or not, called the law of diminishing returns. The more you do, the less initiative you have left to do some more. Yeah, I'm always tempted to ask Annette if she has an electric car. Is that just a little bit cheeky? Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. Next, we have Councillor Barrow. Councillor Barrow.
Thank you, Chair. This was more of a compliment than a question. I was present at the day when the children came in. It was an absolutely fascinating day. And it was so interesting to see the younger children came up with very basic, simple ideas for climate change and the things they could do, just like litter picking and just simple things. And then when we got to the older children in the afternoon, they came up with lots more complicated ideas of, of things that we could, CO2s and all the other things that went with experiments and everything. But it was just fascinating to see how they used their brains and also how we challenged them to explain exactly what they meant. And I think that was it would be nice to see more schools involved. But I think it was just so good to bring the children in and, let's hear their ideas because they're the next generation. So I think it's important to hear from them what they think we should be doing today.
Thank you very much for those thoughts, Councillor Barrow. Absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think everybody can take that away, can't you, as a supportive comment. Thank you, Councillor Barrow. Next, I have Councillor Sadler.
Thank you, Chairman. We've done a lot to reduce our impact. But the important thing is we need to get the message out and spread this to the rest of the electorate and the businesses. And particularly, I'm interested in what are we planning to do on this social housing decarbonisation fund money? What impact can that make and how will it be used?
Thank you, Councillor Sadler. Annette, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there, Councillor Sadler, thank you, Chairman. So in terms of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, there's a whole host of things that can be used for. We're hopefully shortly we'll be having a breakdown of actually what the funding has been used for so far. But it can be a range of initiatives. So it can be insulation, it can be solar panels, it can be advice and guidance, but a whole host of different measures in terms of maintaining and keeping heat within the homes. Obviously, there's a criteria there, so it doesn't apply to everybody. There's a qualification criteria, but I think it's recognised that South Staffordshire have probably the widest criteria to allow as many people as possible to engage with that across the broad spectrum of interventions that you could do on your home. You'll also be aware that as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that we produced just before the summer, or the investment plan that we produced and presented to government in terms of what we wanted to do, was almost like a continuation of that. So whereas because of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, there are broad government limits as what we can do within that. But we wanted to be able to do is widen that out to as many people as possible. So obviously we're yet to hear yet to hear on that. We haven't received any questions on that element of the plan, so we're hoping that will be taken forward. But clearly that's something that we'd want to move forward. But you're absolutely right in terms of what we can do, and you can see even just in terms of this in terms of our own business and our own climate and carbon impact. What we do in this building is only about 13, in terms of electricity, is only about 13% of the total of our impact because of what we do. So one of the things we did have done in recent, and I guess this will fall into this year's actions, was we held an event with businesses when this chamber was full of businesses, big and small. So we had JLR here, we had Bradford Estates, we had some of the big companies in the district, but also some of the small ones, looking at actually how they could engage from a carbon initiatives point of view, and how they could obviously make savings for themselves in terms of financial savings, in terms of reducing costs. That's clearly at the heart of many people's concerns at the moment, but also in terms of how they could reduce carbon from a climate change point of view. So we engaged with SBEN, so Staffordshire Business Environment Network, and they have engaged, following that event, engaged with a number of businesses specifically, and I think a number of businesses have been successful in attracting funding as well for that. I think the point remains that there are what the public sector in terms of the impact across Staffordshire is a small percentage, less than 5% in terms of all the effects. So what we can do is a small difference, but we want to be leading that charge really in terms of what we're doing. And I think whilst our impacts and the impact we'll have in terms of carbon emissions might be small, but actually what we can do to influence is probably greater, and I think that's what matters.
Lovely, thank you, Annette. Thank you, Councillor Sadler, for your question. Did you want to come back? Have you got anything else to add?
I've got a second question, Mr. Chairman, if you want to take that now.
Go on then, Councillor Sadler.
Could I have some more detail on the network recovery mapping, what that actually included, please?
Ryan?
I can mention the specific sites that we're looking at in the district. First off, it's the local nature reserves that we got. So that's Bagridge, Worley, Eston Canal, Railway Walk, Shoal Hill, Wanbrook Walk. I forget the Wanbrook. So it's what we can do to improve those sites. But also we've working with the Wildlife Trust. We've been bringing in sites such as Jubilee Wood in Bilbrook, and some of the green spaces around Purton. So in terms of that, I mean, this is really something that the ecologists, when they in post, will be taking forward, how we can sort of, look to secure some sort of that investment within these green space and what we can do to improve them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Councillor Sadler. Next, I have my Vice Chairman, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, if I can just first of all, give a comment to Councillor Bates, to Annette and Ryan for all the work you've done here. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Obviously, a tremendous amount of work went into it. And to point out also is the climate change fund that is sort of happening at SSDC. The chairman a while about Purton, you may know a chap called Keith Elder, who's the parish chairman also in Purton. He applied for a grant and successfully got it of £200. And last weekend, myself, Councillor Heseltine and quite a few members of the public actually planted 800 snakes head filarius bulbs in Purton in the meadow areas, so that hopefully next spring we'll have the display to sort of beat all displays in Purton. It's going to, like I said, a good sort of nice site. Please come to Purton and see you next spring with us. But thank you for all the work you've done for it. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your thank you for your comments to my vice chairman there. I think again you can take those comments away from you from this guys. Next we have Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Firstly, a comment about the building, please. Firstly, about the library. I realised when I went into the library during the summer how very overheated it was. And there seemed to be no process for cooling in there or blinds either. So just a comment about an oversight, I think, in having so many windows, which actually producing an enormous amount of heat. It did make me wonder whether some of their windows should be solar panels, to be honest, because we could have been generating an awful lot of electricity. And I came into this building on Friday for lunch, and I came into the chamber just to show my husband the refurbishment, and the temperature in this chamber was 23 degrees. And it made me realise that we are sometimes heating spaces that are not occupied. No one was in this room, it was in darkness. And I don't know how we have sensors that would actually sense movement in the building and therefore, or body heat, and would therefore reduce the heat within the rooms. But I'm sure such sophisticated sensors are now available, and whether we could look at buying them, please. That's the first point that I wanted to raise with you, which I'm not requiring an immediate answer to, because I realise it's a technical question. I'm disappointed to see the recycling rates are down to 45.4%. And I want to raise with you the possibility of increasing those. I am still receiving, as I'm sure other people are, continual complaints about cardboard, how to fold it up. I've got 2 people in their 80s who've just been out and bought a Stanley knife, both of whom are in ill health, to cut up their cardboard in order to be able to put it in into the blue bags. And I'm starting to regard this as becoming a health issue as well as everything else. It was my original suggestion that you should use the blue bin for cardboard and paper, or separate them out somehow. And I also have in my garage, left over from years ago, a green box which used to have a string top on it, in which I used to place my plastic and glass. And I realise that some people may not wish to do this, but personally, and having a daughter in Wales where they recycle 7 ways, personally, I would much prefer to separate my waste that could be more effectively recycled. I think that percentage has dropped quite a lot from when we adopted this new system, and I believe that to be a retrograde step. I welcome the comments about the warmer homes, and you may like to know that was nationally acclaimed on the radio last week. I was listening to a programme about climate change, and Staffordshire Warmer Homes was warmly acclaimed then. I am very grateful for what the staff are doing here. I do think we need to be drawing this to more public attention, and I would like to have a dedicated web page on our website where we could put some of the information up that we are requiring about climate change. It would have been lovely to have the illustrators' images of the children's work up on a web page where everyone could see that. I'm sure the parents would have enjoyed seeing it, and the other members of other schools elsewhere. It may be an encouragement to others to join in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, including some of your tips there as well. I thought that was quite interesting. Who wants to respond? Annette?
I'll answer the questions in relation to the building. I think one of the obviously this summer was a particularly hot summer, so I think in relation to that, there's almost like freak weather events. In relation to the solar panels issue, particularly in relation to the library, then maybe that's something that we're looking at. We can look at as part of the audit in terms of whether we could be looking at some like that. Effectively, the building was designed for normal weather temperature, and obviously this summer, for reasons, those a couple of days where it really wasn't. So I suppose in answer to that, and in answer to your question in relation to the thermostat, now I thought that the building, they actually did reduce. Because I know that there's ones upstairs that they hit down to a certain level after a certain time. So I'll check that out, but it's obviously technical position there, but I thought that was the case. So I don't know whether somebody had just vacated this building, this room, and not switched the lights off, but not switched the heating back down. I don't know, but I think it does go off, so it's not on. It's not burning out overnight. If somebody whopped it up to 30 or something like that, it wouldn't do that. Is my understanding, but I will check that out. I think Councillor Bates wants to refer to the waste issues, but in terms of the communications and social media, yeah, that was exactly the point of the climate festival, to try and engage as many people as possible. And at one point we did have the climate change banner on the front web page, which on the front of the council's web page, which took us through to the council's web page for climate change, where we've got all these sort of initiatives and climate friendly initiatives. That has obviously, we could only put one banner at the time, so I think as we get towards the plans for the review for promoting the climate prize again, we'll put it back up there. But it's always something that's on top of the that's on top of the agenda. So we do have a web page. I'm more than happy to share that link with members, but perhaps it's a bit hidden possibly. But I suspect that will get hopefully changed with some of the review to the broader website changes. Councillor Bates.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Picking up on the point regarding the cardboard, this has created a problem, and I've worked very closely with Rachel on this one. And what she's in fact saying to me, that if somebody elderly does have a problem, they can put that cardboard at the side of the bin and it will be collected. But in the first instance, you need, or the person needs to let her know so that she can talk to Biffa, and Biffa will make sure they take that away. Does that help the situation?
If I could just say to you, the bin men in our area are refusing any cardboard that is left by the bin.
Well, I mean, if they are told that to go to a certain address and take it away, they will take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Any more on that?
Well, whilst I've got the microphone, I'd like to come back to Councillor Hewitt's comments, and to tell you that I've had an invitation to visit a proposed solar PV development farm at Littywood, which is Coppenhall. And I went along there and I found it to be very interesting. And the proposal will contribute to local, regional and national energy generation targets in a clean and resourceful manner, and has the capacity to generate enough renewable energy to power approximately 16,000 houses annually. So I think this is probably the way forward. And these panels are at a very low level. They're going to be grassed, and they're going to have sheep grazing there. And it's quite an interesting project. They had an exhibition and invited local people to come along. And I went there with a very open mind, and I shall continue to have that open mind, but it's possibly the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates, for responding, going back to a point that Councillor Ewart made, and for your responses to Councillor Allen. Just to remind members, please try to keep your questions short if possible. Don't mind a little bit of additional context, but just to remind members, we do have an opportunity for a debate stage if people want to make more extended thoughts known as well. Next, we have Councillor Hingley.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I'd like to bring up smokeless zones. Many years ago, we had terrible fogs, and the government decided they've got to do something. So they started with these smokeless zones, and it cleared a lot of the fog, and the air was lovely and clean. I wondered if in South Staffordshire we could now look at it again. I don't think we're in smokeless zones at the moment. I haven't heard, but I'm sure if you look now at chimneys, they're puffing away. Quite a lot of, I don't know, they could be burning wood. But I watched a programme on television the other night, and it was about wood pellets. And they were saying, I think it was Didcote up north, was burning these wood pellets to save on, I think it was gas. And apparently the wood pellets were putting more carbon dioxide up in the air. So I'm wondering if the houses now, they're using wood. I know a lot of people are going around selling wood, and I'm wondering if that could now put carbon dioxide back in the air. And I just thought if we could go smokeless again, get the zones back, I'm sure it would help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hingley. I think we are covered by something, but Ryan, did you want to come back in on this? Bit of clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Hingley. I mean, it's more of a question for my colleagues in environmental health, but I don't think there's any sort of smokeless or air pollution issues in the district at the minute. They've got a few monitoring stations around which they regularly check, but I don't think there's anything that's sort of tipping the threshold. With regard to your comments around sort of wood burning and stuff, it is a bit of a national issue really more and more these days. And I know the government are clamping down on the sale of firewood in that respect. You know, it has to be dry to within a certain percentage before they can sell it. But obviously the government doesn't have any control on what folk burn in their own property, and that's the real issue here, I think. Certainly, I'll confirm that back with environmental health and let you know either way, Councillor Hingley. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Councillor Hingley, for your question. Next up, Councillor Borg.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the presentation and the report that we were sent with the agenda. Just touching on what Councillor Allen had said about recycling, when Annette was speaking, there was a slide that mentioned about recycling, and 45.4% of household waste was collected and composted, 10,060 tonnes of recycling collected and recycled. But in the action plan that we had with our agenda, it doesn't appear that recycling is mentioned. So I'm hoping we're not, dumbing down on that going forward, because that would be a shame. I know we've got some issues with recycling over the new system, but it'd be a shame if we're going to lose priorities on that. And secondly, the information that Ryan was speaking about regarding our footprint. The community hub, we do have a number of staff now working at home, working remotely, which will help us with our figures. But we've also got a number of businesses working from here now, so those people have been replaced. Are the figures in any the figures that have been reported tonight show any relevance to the people that are now working from this building? We're on about our heating costs, but does that include the heating costs of the whole building? Do we know the footprints that businesses that weren't working here 12 months ago are now bringing to Codsall and bringing to this building? I just wondered if there was anything within that report that would show what the businesses here are contributing.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Ryan, you answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borg. In answer to your question about recycling, this is something we may well bring into the action plan. When we wrote the climate change action plan, we realised that because the waste's out to an external contract, it's very difficult to have an influence, you know, in terms of setting actions within a plan for ourselves around that. You know, we're governed by other people to a degree. But nonetheless, you know, we should be proud of what we're doing in South Staffordshire around that, and how I'd like to find some way to sort of bring it into the action plan in the coming years. Regarding the figures for the building, you do raise some very good points around that, around the sort of the myths and the science of sort of reporting on carbon footprints. It's our total energy usage for the building, so it does take into account what the residents are using. And obviously they're charged back a percentage to their bills through that. But you know, everything we do does have a carbon footprint. I mean, and if it's not measured here, it needs to be measured somewhere else. I mean, for instance, I mean, you might think, take a site like Bagridge Country Park, you think, you know, chock full of trees, wildflowers, things like that. But then, on the other hand, we're inviting so many people from outside the district and across the district in to visit it each day using their cars, which, you know, it's nigh on impossible for us to measure the footprint of that part of our operation. So it's a tricky science, and we do the best we can with the figures and, of course, the data that we've got.
Lovely, thank you, Ryan. Next, we have Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question about the electricity provider for the hub. How is the contract structured? Is it a rolling yearly contract, or is it a fixed contract for a certain term? When will we be reviewing it, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Annette, would you like to respond to that? No, Ryan?
Annette may need to elaborate. I don't know the exact detail of that, Councillor Bennett. I mean, I know we're looking to renew the contracts at the depot in the coming years, and we'll be looking at what we can do to tie that down to a green tariff. And I think we're in a contract at Bagridge till about 2024 at the minute, and of course we'll be sort of procuring and looking to lock that down to a green tariff following that. Annette, you have more detail on the hub.
Yeah, last year we procured a one-year deal, given obviously the price of the prices as they were last year. So we will be we're reviewing that again, and clearly, obviously, in terms of looking for a green tariff as part of that. And also, as Ryan said earlier, in terms of some of the other sites that we've got and our other estates, obviously they're not at the moment, they're not all under the same deal, if you like. So we'll be looking at those as well when they periodically come up for review. We'll be looking for a green deal and see if we can bring them all ideally bring them all into one green deal. Ideally, reduce the energy usage through finding alternative methods of energy production. But in the short term, looking for a deal that obviously is financially sound, but also environmentally sound as well.
Thank you both for your contributions. Councillor Burnett, are you happy with that? Lovely, thank you. Next, we have Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ryan, and the other presenters. That was very interesting, and it's good to see the progress that we are making against the plan to date. It's also interesting to hear about the interactions with the school children. As you know, in Wombourne, we've been engaging with local schools on various projects for some time now, with great effect. Which one company that we were working with took away one of the projects that school children had worked on to use to other clients that they were dealing with. They were so impressed with it. In terms of the plan, I noted that we planted, was it 2,000 trees across the district? And I know that there are other organisations planting trees also. I was concerned that in Wombourne we've had a number of trees planted, and we've also had a considerable amount of vandalism where those trees have been uprooted and destroyed. And I wondered, firstly, is this happening in other parts of the district, or is it something that's confined to us locally? And are we doing anything, or can we do anything as a council to mitigate against the effect of this vandalism?
Thank you, Councillor Bond, for your question. I'd definitely like to know the answer to that myself. Ryan, are you able to answer?
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Yeah, we planted 2,000 trees on council-owned sites last year in partnership with the parishes in Burton and Bilbrook, and we have seen a fair few sort of die off, and petty vandalism, I'm sorry to say. The work we are doing with the Forest of Mercia, they tie in sort of maintenance as part of that deal, so we do get some replacement planting the following year. I appreciate that's not an ideal solution if they're target to vandalism and stuff. I mean, the best way we find in terms of a mitigation thing is to try and get young people and local people involved in the planting in the first place and get them to take ownership. It's that sort of outreach work really to try and get them involved on the ground. But there's no easy answer to it really, but that's, for my money, that's the best way to try and encourage good development of these trees.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Councillor Bond, for your question. Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of things. I've got about 3 issues. They're very short and they'll be quick replies, I'm sure. But let's go back to the first graph that we saw on the CO2 emissions. And for 5 years, we had virtually no change, did we, from 2015 to 2020. The graph remains fairly flat, so we weren't saving much carbon there. I mean, the first few years we saved 400,000 tonnes of CO2, which is great. But for the next 5 years, we virtually didn't save anything. Then COVID comes, lockdown comes, and all of a sudden we've saved another couple of 100,000 tonnes. And yes, you did comment that we've now finished, we're all back working nearly normally, and the rate hasn't gone back up. I mean, how long's the CAF been operating? Only a few weeks, couple of months. I don't think that's been counted into that graph. And it's already been mentioned about the fact that we've still got people working from home. I don't know the percentage figure, but it's going to have an impact. And the tenants that we've got, how many of their staff are working from home as well? I don't really want an answer tonight on that, but it's something to consider when we start doing our graphs going forward in the future. Because if they don't tell the truth, very soon we'll be ignoring them, won't we? So we've got to make sure that we are telling the truth where that applies. The other thing is solar power and battery energy storage facilities, and Councillor Bates brought it up. Yeah, I mean, we're going to get solar power farms, whatever you want to call them. We've already got 3 battery energy storage facilities in South Staffordshire. And what we haven't got, and I'm surprised that Barry didn't bring it up, we haven't got a policy yet. Now, we need to make sure that it goes in the development plan and that we apply pressure to national government, because at the moment, I fear, desperately fear, that we're going to be overrun with applications, all of which appear to be in the green belt and will cause a lot of angst amongst the communities. We've got 3 in the chairman's ward as well, so he knows what I'm talking about. We want to make sure when we start having these that we've got a policy where we can say no. At the moment, at the last planning meeting, it was brought up that we'd recently lost on appeal the first application, and I think that then limited what the members thought they could do when they came to make that second and third decisions. I think a lot were thinking, oh, if I say no to this, then it goes to appeal, we're going to cause costs for the authority, etc., etc. We shouldn't be putting our committee members in that position. We desperately need a policy. And the development plan's still probably 12 months away before we get it finalised. And so, in between now and then, if we as an authority can be complaining bitterly to national government, Myself and Kath and Bob Cope are meeting Gavin Williamson in the near future. I've forgotten the date, Kath. But end of this month. But we'll be having a go at him about this as well, and other things. But we need to make sure that we are protecting our green belt and protecting the council and the committee members when they make the decisions at the end of the day. And at the moment, we're not doing that. So if you can take that away and do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for your comments and questions there. Not to disappoint you, I'll certainly say it. We need a strategy for these battery farms. Who would like to respond to that? Annette?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is indeed the point. So we have to make the policy within the context of the local plan. So in the absence of national policy, the local plan has got to be it's got to be the policy framework, which is what we're looking at. So in terms of we don't want to identify areas that are sort of that where we welcome these, but what we do want to do is set out a criteria base where we are able to identify and decisions can be made on that basis. So things in terms of high landscape impact, high landscape harm, green belt, and so on. I mean, that does have an issue in South Staffordshire because we have such a significant amount of the district being green belt. But that's the idea in terms of the local plan, being able to identify those broad areas. And then what we also do in the local plan, giving you a sneak preview here, but in terms of the local plan is looking to identify potentially more detailed supplementary guidance that would fall off the back of that. Wouldn't be appropriate information or guidance off a local plan, but something underneath that, so a supplementary planning document. We've already got some of those on other issues, but you have to have the hook in the guidance first, either in the national policy or the local plan, and we haven't got either of that at the moment. So yes. In terms of responding to that, it's not that we're silent. It's not that we're not doing anything. It's in its preparation. But I absolutely agree that in terms of the national guidance at the moment is silent. And we will make those. We're making those because having those conversations. I've already had those conversations with the MP in relation to that in our various conversations. So yeah, I mean, any conversations that we can do and any pressure that can come to bear. But obviously, clearly, in light of the significant energy savings that we are going to need to find as well. So there's that balance, isn't there?
Thank you, Annette. Councillor Lawrence, you satisfied? Do you want to come back?
Chairman, thank you. Just a lot of applications that will be coming in are purely speculative. They're companies that have got no connection with electricity at all, thinking I can make some money out of this. And this is the danger at the end of the day. The applicant for the 2 Penstone battery farms, their main business is solar power. So I can see in the near future the nice fields all around these 2 battery farms. There'll be applications for solar power farms. So we've got to be very careful. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you for your comments on that, Councillor Lawrence. I don't think there's a need to respond on that any further. Members, I don't have any other names on my list. Are there any other questions? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to give everybody else a chance, as you know. 4 questions. The first 2 there have been attempted answers. Which green energy supplier are we with? Do we know the name of the actual company?
I do know the name. It escapes me, but I can get that name for you.
Is it Good Energy or Ecotricity? No. No. Well, they're the only green energy, 100% green energy suppliers. So that's the first one. The other question was, how much green energy do we produce ourselves? We don't know. Okay. There's an EV strategy mentioned on page 10 of the appendix, but it only mentions employees and the public. It doesn't mention councillors being able to use the EV facilities. And also there was about sort of salary sacrifice for employees I assume that means something to do with money being taken at source. Would that apply to councillors as well?
Annette?
My understanding is that the packages apply to members as well. We'll have to clarify that, but my understanding is certainly in terms of the EV strategy, in terms of the EV chargers, obviously that's there for members of the public as well, and also for the ones that will be on the top car park, they will be for users of the building. So that obviously includes councillors. So there's no reason, absolutely, members are welcome to use use that. I will clarify in relation to members and the salary sacrifice. I think there may be a particular case on that, but I'll clarify that for you and get back to you.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Annette.
Last one then. We've just had a new fleet of, or Biffa have bought a new fleet of refuse vehicles, and it was suggested that we had no influence on what they purchased. Well, surely, if it's part of our reducing our carbon footprint, as they're our contractors, we should have had some influence. I know they can't buy electric lorries because they're not available, but surely they were the latest diesel vehicles, and in that case, why haven't our emissions gone down even more with a brand new fleet? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Are they all your questions that you've got? Yeah, lovely. Who's responding on Biffa? Councillor Bates.
Yes, I was waiting for a question from you. What I can say to you that there was a discussion, and Mark Jenkinson took quite a work deal with Biffa on this, and I'll get Mark to send an email out explaining exactly what was done. Well, you know, let's be fair. You've got an answer to the question you asked, and all right.
Thank you, Councillor Bates.
If you're still having a problem, come back to me and I'll take you through it. Thank you.
There we go. I think I don't think you can say fairer than that one way or another, Councillor Steele. Members don't have any other names. Any more questions? No one's signalling. Thank you. So we can move on to the debate stage. Does anybody wish to debate what we've heard today? No one signalling either. In that case, that is it. That's all that's on my agenda this evening. So thank you, everybody, for sticking with us, listening to the important presentations and asking your questions. And I will see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Good night.